Welcome to the Inside Elections podcast, where we analyze elections in a nonpartisan, data-driven, and accessible way. In this episode, we'll reach into the mailbag to answer questions from loyal listeners and readers. From Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to Mark Teixeira to President Donald Trump, Zoran Mamdani, the Roman Empire, Seattle Seahawks, there's no topic too far out of this end-of-the-year conversation. Buckle up. I'm Nathan Gonzales, editor and publisher of Inside Elections, the go-to place for nonpartisan analysis for more than 40 years, and I will be spending the week of Christmas in Indiana's 3rd District in Northeast Indiana, currently represented by Republican Marlin Stutzman.
And I'm Jacob Rubashkin, deputy editor of Inside Elections, and I will be spending some of the next week in Connecticut's 3rd Congressional District, which is the New Haven area and currently represented by Democratic Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro.
I think the same congresswoman who represented that district last episode when you were...
She's still there, still kicking, and unlike some other members of her own delegation, doesn't have a serious primary challenge.
In Indiana's 3rd, some Republicans tried to put it into a different district, but we'll talk about that later. Didn't quite work out.
While it might have been good for us to introduce some variety to these places, that if we're not going to change the places we're going to every week, we might as well change the district numbers. But we lost out on that one this time around.
I'm surprised. Maybe some state legislators will adopt that as the reasoning. It's not race. It's not partisanship. It is what is best for the Inside Elections podcast. I think that's good criteria.
Well, Nathan, I have told you this before, but to give a sense for everyone of the reach that this show has, I once received a call from a sitting member of Congress who introduced themselves by saying, "This is so-and-so from such and such district." And I was so confused. I did not know what was going on. I was like, I know that's the district you're from. That's why I wanted to talk to you. And they were like, no, I'm doing the bit from the podcast. And I was like, oh,
I like it. Well, I'm glad. It's good to know that people are tuning in because we're obviously having a good time. So I hope other people are having a good time listening.
Yeah.
Before we reach into the mailbag, let's still do a couple headlines. Jacob, what should people not miss?
So Washington Republican Dan Newhouse announced that he would not seek re-election next year to the Evergreen State's 4th Congressional District. Now, Newhouse was one of 10 Republicans way back in 2021 who voted to impeach Donald Trump after the January 6th insurrection. But he's one of just 2 of those 10 who still remains in Congress. The other one, California Representative David Valadao, also has a difficult re-election coming up next year. So it is very possible that by the end of this Congress, beginning of next Congress, there will be no Republicans left who voted to impeach Trump in the House. Now, the 4th Congressional District should stay in Republican hands. Trump won it by 20 points thereabouts. Former NASCAR driver Jared Sessler is making his 3rd bid for the seat after losing to Newhouse last year. But Yakima County Commissioner Amanda McKinney and State Senator Matt Benke are expected to run as well.
Jacob, very nice. So as an East Coast Mid-Atlantic kid, getting Yakima, that's impressive. Well done.
Well, my sister may or may not have lived in this district for several years, so I'm at least a little bit familiar with it. Don't want to embarrass myself too much.
Well, now you're telling that you had insight, but that's well done. So in Michigan's 4th District, Republican Congressman Bill Huizenga confirmed and announced that he would run for re-election to his Western Michigan seat. There was some question about whether he would run or not. He was kind of pushed aside from running for the Senate in favor of former Congressman and former nominee Mike Rogers. He was also passed over for Financial Services Committee gavel. And so there were a lot of reasons for him to be upset with what was going on, but he's running for re-election. It's still a very competitive district and likely race. We just moved it not too long ago from likely Republican to lean Republican, which is one category more vulnerable. In Michigan, race for race, pound for pound is going to be a lot next cycle, from Senate race, governor's race, multiple competitive House races. It's going to be a big state to watch.
Moving south in Texas, President Trump waded into several contentious House primaries this week, offering his endorsements to Representative Tony Gonzales in the 23rd District and Eric Flores in the 34th District. Gonzales is facing a challenge from YouTuber and gun manufacturer Brandon Herrera, who nearly beat him in a runoff for this seat last year. Former Representative Kiko Canseco, who held the 23rd for one term in the early 2010s, is also running, made a last-minute entrance into that race. In the 34th District, Flores is vying for the Republican nomination to take on Democrat Vicente Gonzalez in a top target for House Republicans, a seat that got more competitive for them after Republicans' mid-decade redistricting. Now, he faces former Representative Mayra Flores, the two are not related, who has lost two previous races in a row against Gonzalez. Trump also endorsed attorney Chris Gober in the crowded primary for the solid Republican 10th District, which is being vacated by Republican Michael McCall.
And one of the biggest races in Texas that the president has not weighed into is the United States Senate race, particularly the Republican primary between Senator John Cornyn, State Attorney General Ken Paxton, and Congressman Wesley Hunt. I'm sure they all want it, and I'm not sure the president. I guess he could do a dual endorsement, but it seems like unless he knows he can pick a clear winner, he doesn't want to be on the side of someone who's losing, and that might be tough to distinguish in that race right now.
Yeah, I think a dual endorsement would have a similar effect to no endorsement, which is to say it would preserve the status quo. And I don't think that's what any of the candidates want at this point, but certainly not John Cornyn.
Yeah. Cornyn is in a lot of trouble in that primary. Could make the runoff, but then jumping from the low 30s to 50 plus 1% is a big jump for an incumbent who's been around for a couple of decades.
Yeah.
And moving back up north in Maine's 2nd District, Democratic State Senator Joe Baldacci is moving toward a run for Congress, if that name sounds familiar. He is the younger brother of former governor and former Congressman John Baldacci, who represented the 2nd District back in the day. This race is it's an open seat for Democrats. When Jared Golden announced he would not run for re-election, the Republican nominee will likely be former Governor Paul LePage. This is a big race for both parties, considering that the House margin is so close, but a difficult hold for Democrats, both with Golden out and with LePage in.
Yeah, this one is a rare bright spot for Republicans on the House map right now. Jared Golden was always going to have a real race, but he was Democrats' probably best incumbent, certainly relative to the top of the ticket. He had shown himself to be a proven crossover vote winner. And so, Democrats will have to work hard to keep this race in their column. And as Republicans are looking to keep this House majority, they need to find the few opportunities wherever they can to flip these kind of Democratic seats. The more seats they can bank on, the easier their path will become.
Maybe there's something about the Northeast with the Baldacci brothers in Maine, the Sununu brothers in New Hampshire. Is there another set of siblings that I'm missing?
Well, there's
this add to the trend.
There's this family in Massachusetts called the Kennedys who have won a seat here and there as well. I think there's something a little parochial perhaps in the water up in our the cradle of our nation that still affects the politics to this day.
But one of the challenges is that I heard that the new Kennedy Center board, besides trying to rename the Kennedy Center, they've issued a decree that all Kennedys have to run as Trump Kennedys now. So that could make things challenging for on the Democratic side if you have that in front of your name.
That very much limits the possibilities for the Kennedy clan.
It's just what I heard. I mean, people are saying. For the end of the year, we thought it would be a great opportunity to dip into the mailbag, which might not be quite as exciting as Santa's gift bag, but very similar, I would say, and try to answer some questions from loyal readers and listeners. I don't know. Well, let's just be front, Jacob. This is your idea. So if this is terrible, I'm gonna blame you for this whole episode. But I'm encouraged. I think it has promise.
Everyone loves a holiday mailbag episode. You can put it on while you're roasting your lamb or ham or frying your latkes. Come on, it's
driving to
Indiana,
driving hypothetically to Indiana's third. Yeah, I'm sure my kids, they could be watching a movie on a DVD or listening to this podcast. I know which one's going to win. It's going to be the podcast.
Exactly. We're for the children. That's our secondary nonpartisan political analysis for the children.
I love it. All right. Well, let's see. I guess we did get some responses. So what do we have first?
Mail time.
Yeah. So we'll start off with an easy one from a friend of the podcast, Aaron Covey of the Cook Political Report, who writes in on the pneumatic tubes to ask us who's going to win.
Yeah. Yes, Aaron, that's the answer. Yes, they're all the good candidates are going to win. All the bad can't. No. We appreciate Aaron's for she's an alum of Inside Elections, and all we're hoping for, I think, is that the people that we think are going to win are correct. Yeah, let's run through all 435 races right now. We had another question about all right, let's do this one.
That's all you're giving?
What do you want? Who do you think is going to win, Jacob?
Look, I think we can say a little bit more than that. I think we can say that in a midterm election, historically, the president's party has a difficult time winning races, especially in the House, but also in the Senate. And in this particular instance, right, we currently see Republicans favored in 213 House districts and Democrats in 212. But of the toss-up races, the remaining 10, 8 of those are Republican races and only 2 are Democratic. So right off the bat, you can kind of see Republicans have more exposure here. They are fighting against the historical trend. The reality is only 3 times in the last 100 years has the party in power picked up House seats in a midterm election. And that's 1930, 1998, and 2002. And so you have to, as a Republican, ask yourself, are the circumstances of this 2026 midterm akin to the Great Depression, the Bill Clinton impeachment process, or the aftermath of 9/11? Because otherwise, you're looking at having to break tremendous precedent here. Now, the redistricting gives them a bit of an advantage, but I think that as we head into 2026, we can realistically look at the map and say, Republicans have a lot of opportunities with strong incumbents, but Democrats have a tailwind from history and from the current environment that gives them reasons to be optimistic.
Yes. Yeah, that is a more thorough answer. Yeah, it is, and those going back to those like few exceptions in the House in 2002, President George W. Bush's reelection rate was about 68%. It had fallen from almost 90%, but still 68%. Bill Clinton's job approval rating was 66%. And right now we're looking at President Donald J. Trump at about 42%, depending on which average you're looking at. So yeah, a big difference between those historical outliers and where we are today. A traditional midterm election where the president's party loses House seats is the most likely outcome.
Yeah.
Looking a little bit more granular, what is each party's biggest recruitment hole heading into 2026? And what were some glaring recruitment holes from the past? But I guess let's start with the present. What do you see as a glaring recruitment hole?
Well, I'll offer a couple of suggestions here. The first is, looking at the Senate, right? There are a few recruitment holes that come to mind. On the Democratic side, they need somebody in Alaska. We all know who they're waiting for, and that's former Congresswoman Mary Peltola, who has not said whether she's going to run for governor or run for Senate. But this is a seat that, under the right circumstances, you can kind of see it being competitive. This is a state that Trump won by just about 10 points, which is akin to most of the other states Democrats are competing in this cycle. Well, half of the state, more than half of the states the Democrats want to compete in this cycle, Ohio, Texas, and Iowa, are all states that I believe voted for Trump by as much or more than Alaska did. Republicans are spending money to boost incumbent Dan Sullivan right now. Democrats are spending money against Dan Sullivan right now, even though there's no candidate. If they can get Peltola in the race, it's a very real race. Every seat that they can put on the Senate map is helpful. If they can't get her in the race, I think they still need to find someone who they can try and put some money and effort behind to expand the map, because otherwise you are relying on flipping two of Iowa, Texas, and Ohio, in addition to tough races in Maine and North Carolina. So Alaska, certainly the biggest hole on the map for Democrats. I would say Minnesota is probably a bit of a recruitment hole for Republicans at the moment here. There are a few candidates in the race, but nobody who is particularly spectacular, and at least one candidate who we know will not win under any circumstances, and that's Royce White, who lost a Senate race last year and has a ton of baggage. Republicans are trying to find someone, maybe former NFL sideline reporter Michelle Tafoya, to be their candidate there, but at the moment, there's nobody who really looks like they could make Democrats sweat in that state. So that's where I'd go in the Senate. On the House, there are a lot more options to pick through, but two that come to mind immediately. I think Democrats need a candidate in Wisconsin's first congressional district. They have a couple that are running, but nobody who's really made a ton of waves so far. But that's a district that on paper should be relatively competitive. Biden actually won it, I believe, by Biden maybe lost it by a point or won it by a point. So I think it was very essentially even in 2020, and Trump won it narrowly in 2024. Democrats don't have a top tier candidate there against Brian Style. Republicans, I mean, they need a candidate to run in the two districts in Michigan, one of which they have a candidate who's very green and trying to grow into the role there in Michigan's 8th district against Kristen McDonald-Rivet, which is a Trump seat. And then Michigan's 3rd district, which is a leftward trending seat that Democrats captured two cycles ago. There's nobody running at all. So I would say both of those districts are crying out for a Republican candidate. I'd throw in Pennsylvania 17 as well. Chris DeLuzio, the Democratic incumbent there, nobody has filed to run against him so far.
Well, I don't know if people could hear me crossing districts off that you that I had on my list that you mentioned, but the only of the current ones that I would point out on the Republican side, Republican holes, would be in Oregon, the entire state of Oregon. There appear to be no Republicans interested in running, and those districts on paper are not so far out of reach. And Oregon's 5th district, which is represented by Democrat Janelle Bynum, that has an inside elections baseline of just D plus 3.8. 3.8, that's not a massive. And then the 6th district, which is represented by Andrea Salinas, that's a D plus 6.7. So, and Republicans have no one. And this is pretty remarkable when you think about Bynum in the 5th district. She only won the last election with 52%. So it shows, I think, where that Republicans are focused a lot on defense first and then on offense, and this is not up in those upper tiers. And the Pacific Northwest was not terrible for Vice President Harris. For as poorly as the election nationwide went, the Pacific Northwest, Harris and Democrats held pretty strong, and so those are recruitment holes there for Republicans. But let's go backward. What do you think? Are there any recruitment holes in the past or misses that come to mind?
Yeah, so this is a kind of a tougher question because it when you're looking in hindsight, thinking about like a race like Michigan's 10th district in 2022, which was John James versus Carl Marlinga. John James wins very narrowly against a flawed candidate who really does not get very much outside support at all in Carl Marlinga. Now, is that a recruitment failure? I would argue yes, even though Marlinga came very close. This is a district that Democrats were winning at the top of the ticket. Had they had a stronger candidate who didn't have the kind of baggage that Marlinga had, this is a guy who was charged with and tried for corruption charges. He was acquitted. He faced attacks over clients that he had represented as a defense attorney. If they had run Congressman Andy Levin, who represented a lot of that district over the previous decade, I think they probably would have won. But you can also make an argument, maybe if they had spent a little money on Marlinga like they did for other candidates, he would have won too. The other one that comes to mind is Pennsylvania's first district in 2020, which was Brian Fitzpatrick. This is a seat that Biden carried by a healthy margin at the top of the ticket. Democrats just couldn't find someone to run. The candidate that they wanted to run had to drop out, who was already kind of a C-tier candidate, had to drop out because of some things she had said on social media or at a meeting that got surfaced, and then the candidate that ended up running couldn't raise any money, didn't get any attention, and lost even as Fitzpatrick was winning a district that Biden was winning at the top of the ticket.
Well, and I started to shake my head for those of you watching on YouTube, because Pennsylvania 1 is on my list, but actually from the 2018 cycle, right? 2018, because we talked about this when we decided to move the current rating of the race from likely Republican to lean Republican, so putting Brian Fitzpatrick in a more vulnerable seat. But that's because in 2018 he faced a horrendous candidate and only won by 2 points. And that was President Trump's first midterm. And so if Democrats had been able to put up a better quality candidate then, we might not even be talking about Brian Fitzpatrick right now, unless he lost that race, came back to win. So that, I think, was a miss by Democrats in that midterm, a couple midterms ago.
Yeah. Who else is on your list?
That was it. That was
the one. Okay. It's not much of a list.
We'll call it a bullet point. That's what I know. I'm going to stop having you go first, Jacob, I think, from taking my answers. That's okay. That's all right. I'm comfortable with it.
Well, let me ask you one that you might be on firmer ground answering here. Mail time! Which comes from, I believe this is a question we got on Twitter. Democrats have been hoping to swing Indiana blue since the days of Evan Bayh, former senator, former governor. Obama narrowly won the state in 2008, the first Democratic candidate to do so since Lyndon Baines Johnson. What are the Democratic chances of turning the state in 2026 after the latest gerrymander mess?
Not good is the short answer. I'd love talking about Indiana 2008, though, or the 2008 in general and how Obama did, because he did carry Indiana and North Carolina for the first time in a long time for a Democrat. And I believe that is because of a primary, because of the extended primary with Clinton, that it forced two well-financed campaigns to go deep into the state in registering, organizing, getting people involved. And I think that helped Obama in the general election. Now, that is, anytime I think of Indiana 2008, that's what I think about. But when we look at now, even though it was a clear repudiation and a remarkable repudiation by state Republicans against President Trump and the White House, who wanted them to redistrict to try to gain to be a 9-0 map from a 2-7 or a 7-2 map, I don't think that really tells us anything about Democratic chances of winning statewide. Well, first, there aren't big statewide races this cycle in Indiana, but I don't think Democrats are just really on the march. I think that's still going to be a difficult state when we look ahead to future presidential elections. With the Senate races, I mean, we'll see what Senator Young runs again, what that looks like, and who the candidates and nominees are. But Indiana is a red state. I know that's why people tune in for me to tell you that, but I think it's still going to be a while before Democrats make some significant inroads, even though they had a victory by the new map not passing.
Yeah, and there is one, the big event in Indiana next year will be the state secretary of state race, which will feature Bo Bai, who is the son of Evan Bai, who was mentioned in that question, and the grandson of Birch Bai, who was a venerable longtime Democratic senator, and I believe may go down in history potentially as the last person to amend the Constitution, because he wrote the 27th Amendment to the Constitution when he was in the Senate. And not to diverge us too much here, I think that we should consider the people who wrote the constitutional amendments founding fathers as well as the people who wrote the original Constitution. I do think that's an important part of understanding how American government works. And so, in a way, Birch Bai may have been the last founding father of the American government. But we'll see. The Secretary of State race got a lot of attention back in 2022. The candidate there, Destiny Wells, was highly touted by Democrats, and she didn't get particularly close, even though the Republican, Diego Morales, in that race had some baggage. So we'll see. But I think to the extent there are going to be highly competitive races in Indiana this year, it'll be about the first district with Frank Mervan. And then if any of those members in the state Senate actually do get primary challenges that the Trump administration has been threatening to back over the last couple of months.
In the state's politics, where could Democrats start to gain ground or get a foothold? And it could be with help from the Republican Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith, who is he is a lot. I think that's what the kids say. There's just a lot going on. I mean, he is involved with there are stories of a scandal related to the church where he was on staff, and the staff there, and it's kind of it's an emerging mess that, if it continues to seep further, there would have to be a divide in the Republican Party or people fleeing the Republican Party, I think, to have Democrats have an inroad. But the lieutenant governor could make things more complicated for Republicans, and it really needs to be.
Yeah.
Real time.
All right, let's go to a completely different part of the country for this question. I think this was sent in and not on the Twitters, but what office is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez most likely to run for in 2028?
So I'll give a cop-out answer to begin with, which I think the office she is most likely to run for in 2028 is member of Congress from New York's 14th district. I think there are just more scenarios in which she runs for that than the other two offices that are going to be available to her, which are Senate or President. Now, if we take out the possibility that she runs for re-election to the House, I actually think it's more likely that she runs for President than she runs for Senate. I think that the traditional reasons why people jump from the House to the Senate do not apply to her. I think that people try to make that move because it gives you greater prominence. It gives you greater entree to the national politics at large. It gives you a larger base of support within your state. She doesn't need any of those things. She's already one of the most prominent members of the Democratic caucus. She is well known nationally. She has no trouble getting media attention when she wants it. And she's currently on a path in the House, I would say, that feels like it's destined for much larger things, right? Whether that's in leadership or probably more likely, I would say, on a committee track. I think she would probably be pretty interested in being the chairman of oversight at some point, or something in that vein. I think she's shown herself to be one of the few members, I would argue, who really seems to enjoy being on a committee and asking committee questions, not just for showmanship, as a lot of members in both parties do, but to get answers. And so I look at that and I see someone who could very much accomplish a lot of the things she wants to accomplish from her perch in the House. That said, she clearly wants to be president, and she is talking more openly about the possibility in the last couple of days even than she has before. There was a poll that tested her against Vice President J.D. Vance. It had her leading by 2 points. Throw all the primary or the general election, throw all the primary 2028 polls in the trash. Certainly throw all the general election 2028 polls in the trash. But I think it was notable that she promoted that poll when she was asked about it. Would you beat Vance in a general election? She said she would stomp him. So I don't know. I think it's more likely that she does that than run for Senate, which would involve either primarying Senator Schumer, which would be a really bruising fight, or running against a half dozen other of the most ambitious politicians in America in an open primary if Schumer doesn't run for re-election.
Yeah, I'm saying president. I mean, mark it down December. We're recording on December 19th, 2025. I think the most likely for 2028 for AOC is president, partially for the reasons, that you mentioned. And I just, though I can hear the Republicans in the background listening to this saying, bring it on, bring it, she can't win, never in a million years. And okay, well, let's go back, 8, 9, 10 years to when Donald Trump was running for president, and some Democrats saying, yeah, bring it on. He's a joke. He's a reality star. He's never going to win. And now we're in President Trump's second term. And so it's going to be, sure, there's going to be a ton of Democrats running for president in 2028. But also, what are the circumstances around the Republican, the 4 years of Republicans in power, whether it's President Trump for the full years, whether it's President Vance, finishing this term, whatever it might be. How does the country feel about the way things are going in the direction under Republican leadership? Because that's going to tell us more about what whomever the Democratic nominee is going to be. And I'll put this in there too, that I saw part of AOC's town hall on CNN. I want to say this was a few months ago, and I didn't watch the whole thing. I just saw a clip, but she was talking about healthcare, and she was talking about how she wants everyone to have affordable healthcare. She specifically said, I don't care if you're, MAGA, MAGA Republicans should have affordable healthcare. I thought that was pretty remarkable. We don't really hear a lot of politicians talking in a bipartisan way or wanting anything good for someone who's on the other side. And so I think people underestimate AOC at their own political peril.
Yeah. No, I think clearly, she is a talented politician, and I think we would all do well to expand our perceptions of what is possible in American politics. If there's one thing we've learned over the last decade, I think it should be that.
Open-mindedness is good in many ways, including political prognostication.
Yeah. And here's the thing, right? I do think if there's something that really can push AOC into this race, it is that there's a real faction of the Democratic Party that has been led by Bernie Sanders for the past decade that will not have she is, to my eye, probably the only other member of the party who can lay claim to keeping that faction consolidated when Bernie doesn't run again, because Bernie's not going to run again. And so I think that if she doesn't run, there's nobody else who can keep that set of voters together, and they disperse a million ways. And maybe somebody can, by attrition and strength of campaigning over the course of 2027, somebody can reconsolidate those voters, but that's going to take a lot of work, and they're going to have to beat out a lot of other candidates to make it happen. I think she's one of the few people that could start with that base very early on. I think that would make her a very credible candidate for the nomination.
Mail time!
All right, back to the mailbag. Nathan, you're just getting all the Midwest questions today.
all the places I'm going to be driving across
Exactly.
over the
On the
weekend.
ground reporting. Well, maybe when you're in Ohio, you can think a little bit about how Ohio went from being a swing state. The Democrats won as recently as 2012 at the presidential level to a red state that Trump won by almost 12 points in 2024. We know that anger about trade policy has played out strongly for Republicans over the last decade or so in the Midwest. But both Bill Clinton, who literally did NAFTA, and Barack Obama both won it twice.
Yeah, what first comes to mind is a previous episode when we had Kyle Condict of the University of Virginia's Larry Sabato's Crystal Ball, who we just had Larry Sabato on. But anyway, Kyle wrote a book. He joked about writing a book called Bellwether, Why Ohio Picks the President. That came out in early 2016, which is around the time that Ohio no longer was a swing state. And so Kyle is he is great, particularly on Ohio. But I think Ohio, there's a lot of moving parts. But when you look at it compared to the national average, Ohio is a little bit has fewer voters than with a college degree. It's about 32%. The national average is about 37%. It's slightly downscale when it comes to income. The median income in Ohio is $72,000, where nationwide it's almost $82,000. Slightly higher percentage of people in poverty, and those types of the voters making less, voters without a college degree. Those are the types of voters that have been moving more toward President Trump and the Republican Party over the last multiple cycles, and I think that has helped push Ohio further away from that toss-up column. And more evidence beyond the presidential race is Senator Sherrod Brown, the Democrat who won he was in office, statewide office, for almost 30 years across the Senate and Secretary of State races, and lost re-election in 2024. And it's not that he had really changed, but the state continued to change and his races got more difficult. He is trying to make that comeback bid this time against appointed Senator John Husted. But Ohio is not the swing state that it once was.
No, certainly not. And it's not Indiana, right? I think there are kind of gradations to the way that we look at states that move off of the battlefield. But I think this cycle in particular will be telling as to where Ohio has kind of settled in terms of its politics, because you've got that Senate race with Sherrod Brown trying to make a comeback after losing by 4 points last year. You've got a very competitive gubernatorial race between probably Vivek Ramaswamy and Amy Acton. And you've got a couple of highly competitive Democratic congressional races, incumbents who are looking to hold on to difficult seats as well. So there are opportunities for Democrats to show that they can get back to competing. But like you said, I mean, the fact that there just isn't the kind of density of college-educated voters, especially in the suburban areas around the three major cities, has just prevented Democrats from keeping pace with Republicans as Republicans put up larger and larger margins in the more rural parts of Ohio.
And I tell you what, that stretch of road on Highway 30 from kind of just north of Columbus going up to near Fort Wayne is brutal. I say brutal in terms of not much happening. I apologize if I'm offending all of our listeners from Northwest Ohio, but when you're looking
get an angry call from Bob Latta.
When you're looking forward to Van Wert, Ohio, and that's like the next big city, then you're on quite a road.
Mail time.
All right, we're jumping around the country. This question is about new Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson. Is new Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson being slept on because New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani has captured all of the attention?
Yeah, so it's a good question. for those of you who haven't been tracking the Seattle mayoral election, Katie Wilson is the mayor-elect. She is a Democratic socialist. She defeated incumbent mayor Bruce Harrell by about 2,000 votes in last November's election. She's a first-time candidate. She's a organizer who organized a transit riders union about a decade and a half ago, and has used that to raise her political prominence. So it was a big deal that she won this very competitive mayoral election. I think there are a couple reasons why she has not captured the kind of attention as Mamdani has. The first is, of course, scale, right? New York City is the largest city in America. It's 10 times larger than Seattle. And there were 10 times as many votes cast in the New York City mayoral race as in the Seattle mayoral race. And New York is the media capital of America and arguably the world. And there are a lot of reporters there. And so it is naturally going to garner significantly more coverage than any other city in America. I think it's not just a Seattle thing, but clearly any other mayoral election is really going to struggle in comparison to the race in New York. But look, I think that the victory of Katie Wilson is a sign that at least in the Pacific Northwest, this strain of politics is alive and well. I think if you're Congressman Adam Smith and you're facing a challenge in your reelection from Kshama Sawant, who is not just a Democratic socialist, but just a socialist who's running as an independent against you in your congressional race next year, you probably still feel okay about your prospects, but you might be a little bit more anxious that now that the incumbent mayor of Seattle has lost his election to a more progressive challenger. I think if you're a Democrat anywhere in the country, you probably can take a little bit of optimism if you're politically aligned with Wilson in terms of her win. But Seattle is a big city, but it's not a city on the scale of New York, because nowhere in America essentially is on the scale of New York. I don't think that people always understand just the gap between New York and everywhere else in terms of population, and certainly in terms of economic, generation and things like that. I mean, New York is 3 times as large as the next largest city in America, which is Los Angeles. So, anyways, I'm rambling here. I think that there are a lot of reasons why Mamdani has captured the kind of attention that he has. I think he's also an easier villain, being a Muslim immigrant with a name that is hard for a lot of people to pronounce, as opposed to a 43-year-old white lady from Binghamton, New York, which is Katie Wilson's background. And so I think that has made him an easier villain for people who want to talk about him, as well as the people who support him and are excited that he won.
Well, one way that Mayor Wilson could raise her national profile is raising the Lombardi Trophy alongside the Seattle Seahawks next year. And I can tell you what's going on in Seattle right now is that there are a lot of people excited after the largest victory, come from behind victory in franchise history against the Rams. That was insanity. Coming from a lifetime Seahawk fan myself, that was... I admit I did not think, being down 30-14 in the fourth quarter, that was going to end in a victory. And even if you're just a casual football fan, look up the second 2-point conversion, the second of 3 2-point conversions, the madness of the backwards pass and in the deflection and the recovery in the end zone. I've never seen anything like that watching football for many years. So yeah, maybe she can ride the Seahawks train into they can help each other. They can help each other gain in prominence.
There you go.
Sticking on the sports theme, we have a question from our friend Nathaniel Rakic, former he's Inside Elections alum. He is now at VoteBeat. He is wondering who are each party's most promising recruits for the congressional baseball and softball games.
Well, I think this is more of a question for you. I'll give the easiest answer here, which is Mark Teixeira, who is very recently a former professional baseball player, is running for Congress in the 21st district in Texas. I don't think Democrats would win another game if they get Teixeira, and they'll probably make him pitch, I would imagine, even though he was a first baseman, right? But I'm sure
he can only bat once in the lineup. But yes, if he pitches, that would probably just being younger than 90 years old, gives him an advantage.
But I don't know, Nathan. Who else has been on your radar?
Well, there's no one at that caliber. It would have been interesting, Jacob. You broke the story earlier when Democrats were trying to recruit recently former pitcher, St. Louis Cardinals pitcher Adam Wainwright into a Missouri's second district race, but that didn't end up happening. Actually, when looking at the recruitment whole question, I was doing a little bit of homework on the Republican who is running in Michigan's 8th district. His name is Amir Hassan. He's a Navy veteran, and he played. I was watching a podcast that he did. He played 3 sports in high school. He's younger than 90 years old. I was like, including baseball, he mentioned. So I'm like, anybody young-ish who's played baseball in high school, 3 sports in high school, he's probably has more talent than a lot of the members of Congress. So that came to mind. And then for the women, we interviewed Kate Conley from New York. She's one of multiple Democrats running in New York's 17th district against Mike Lawler. She's special forces. She is very confident in a lot of things. I'm not sure how much specific softball talent. I'm trying to remember that interview, but I think that she will bring. If she can win the primary and win the general, she could bring some athleticism to that game.
Yeah, she was doing muscle ups in her launch video, so I think she will be forced to be reckoned with if she can get through those 2 races and make it on the diamond for the members and potentially Democrats in the baseball game as well. She strikes me as the kind of player who might go for the baseball game as well.
And I don't have a good record. It's not good for me to highlight potential impact players because I wrote a long story about, at the time, Florida Congressman Ron DeSantis being the antidote to the star player at the time, which was a Democratic Congressman Cedric Richmond. Because DeSantis played in college, he was co-captain of the Yale baseball team, played with former pitcher and now former general manager, I believe, Craig Breslow. And it just didn't. He was injured. He didn't really have any impact on the congressional race. But if you do love congressional races, you need to check out Nathaniel's stuff because he has become the key source for stats for the congressional baseball game, and he's doing the softball game stuff too. So everyone needs to follow everything Nathaniel does. That's good. You can get a long way in life by doing that.
Yeah. All right, Nathan, here's a good one for you, which I may or may not answer because I've already done like a 2-hour-long podcast on this question with friends of the podcast, Galen Druk and Leah Skarnam. But what is your Roman Empire / butterfly effect moment in politics? Like a moment that, had it gone differently, there would have been a huge domino effect for years.
So I tried to do a little bit of homework on this because this is harder. I'm getting old and it's hard to just pull stuff from the deep recesses of my brain. So, all right, what events do I think really had long-term waves? I'll give a few kind of short ones and then dive into one a little bit more. So the New Hampshire debate in 2016, the 2016 race where Chris Christie attacked Marco Rubio when Marco Rubio repeated the same talking point multiple times, and Chris Christie just went after him, right? And that tanked Rubio's chances, but more importantly, it boosted John Kasich's chances, or at least in John Kasich's mind, it boosted his chances. John Kasich stayed in the race, and I would argue kept the non-Trump Republican field divided for a lot longer, and ultimately led to Trump becoming the nominee. I think if Rubio had not stumbled there, or Chris Christie hadn't attacked him, I think Rubio finishes much stronger in New Hampshire, and more Republicans can't drop out more quickly, and it gets to be more difficult for Trump to win that nomination. If Trump doesn't win that nomination, then there's a lot of things that could go on from there. What if Hillary Clinton didn't have a private server at her house? If someone had just stepped in and said, hey, I don't think this is a good idea, that probably could have changed things. And what if President Joe Biden had not run for re-election? I think that could have led to a different result. There would have been a wide open Democratic primary. I don't think it would have just handed over everyone. It would have just gotten behind Vice President Harris. She might have ended up being the nominee as well, but I think it would have been a different race. But the one I wanted to focus on is Illinois Republican Jack Ryan and his public divorce. Where his divorce becoming public. Now, Jack Ryan was the Republican Senate nominee against someone named Barack Obama. And Jack Ryan was a Goldman Sachs guy who left Wall Street to invest his own money in an inner city Chicago school for boys. He's a good-looking guy. He was married to actress Jerry Ryan from Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, I believe. I'm not a Star Trek fan, but
Voyager.
What was that? Oh, Voyager. Well, I just show my Star Trek, lack of Star Trek knowledge. But they did get divorced. Some things came out. I believe it was actually in the child custody papers. And it ended up being, at the time, so embarrassing that he dropped out. And Alan Keyes ended up being the Republican nominee, and Obama won that race and went, obviously, to bigger and even better things. But if that hadn't have happened, I mean, that was at a time when Republicans could still win in Illinois. And I think it would have been a different race. Obama may not have won. I'll probably get some calls from Democrats on that. But that could have, I think that was a big factor, a big piece of an important race.
Yeah, and of course, all that goes back to Jerry Ryan being cast in Star Trek Voyager, which put a lot of strain on her marriage with Jack Ryan, and that all goes back to choosing to reboot the Star Trek franchise with The Next Generation in the early '90s and the success of that show. A lot of dominoes. Star Trek plays a big role in American politics, if you didn't know. Look, I mean, the answer to this is always going to be the 2000 election and the ballot design in Florida. I mean, that I don't want to spend any more time on that because it is just kind of like the case of like American politics looks fundamentally different over the last 25 years if Al Gore is president rather than George W. Bush. And probably, for the next 25 to 50 years as well, looking at things like the Supreme Court. The other ones that come to mind, thinking about like kind of not necessarily just outcomes, but more kind of specific moments or natural disasters, scandals, things like that. The assassination of Bobby Kennedy in 1968. What does that presidential election look like? Does Bobby Kennedy win against Richard Nixon? Do we get the Southern strategy, right? I mean, there are all sorts of, that 68 election is such an important moment in American politics in terms of the realignment, the racial realignment at the federal level between North and South and black and white. Does that look different with Bobby Kennedy as opposed to Hubert Humphrey? Does the Vietnam War take on a different shape with somebody who was as anti-war as Kennedy was positioning himself to be, taking over? All sorts of questions there that come to mind for me. So I would go with that one, and then I would go with the other one, Ross Perot's paranoia causing him to drop out of the 1992 presidential election over the summer when he is winning that race. He is ahead in the polls. He is ahead of both George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton. He is running a really kind of sophisticated operation, trying to do something that no presidential candidate really has ever done, which is win as a third-party candidate. He's got his own personal fortune backing his campaign. And at the peak of his position in that race, he drops out. and he gets back into the race several months later, but by then it's too late. The momentum has deflated, and he finishes third, still with 20%. But I just am so fascinated by what would have happened had he not kind of been seeing, essentially, he said that there were vans tailing his daughter around. He was quite paranoid at that point. If he had stuck it out, what would politics have looked like? Would he have won? Would we have had a three-party kind of system set up in the 90s with a win by a third-party presidential candidate? I don't know.
And related to this, what would have happened if AOL and Time Warner hadn't merged in the early 2000s? Because then a young aspiring reporter named Nathan Gonzales may not have been looking to leave CNN for something called the Rothenberg Political Report, which ended up being something called Inside Elections, which ended up with a platform at the Inside Elections podcast. We may not even be here without that AOL Time Warner merger. So who knows?
And Warner never had a bad merger again. Does it feel, let me ask you this, Nathan, let me turn the tables. I'll throw in a question into the mailbag here. You and I share something, which is that it seems like, for me, when I saw the news of this Netflix acquisition of WBD, as it's called now, Warner Brothers Discovery, it took me back to my start in journalism, which was in 2018 as an intern at CNN, which happened right when the sale of Time Warner, as it was called, to AT&T went through. And it was kind of this weird full circle moment for me to see, how far I had come and how not far Warner Brothers had come, Time Warner, Turner. And so I'm curious what it feels like for you, given that merger was right at the start of your journalistic career, now seeing Warner Brothers yet again at the center of this kind of media kerfuffle.
Well, this is going to surprise you, Jacob, that I'm a little bit older, and those memories have been, this is 25 years ago. And I was so young in my career and being somewhat naive at that point. I did learn that, and I haven't really gone into this in any public, but being friends with HR it can be healthy, or at least because I was so new in my career that I didn't even know. My colleagues were getting called to, windowless rooms and being told they were fired, and it was a lot swirling around for someone who had, had the job for, 8 months at the time. And because they were firing all CNN.com employees, basically, because there were AOL employees that would supposedly take their place. But overall, it's just so, it's so long ago. And I'm so grateful that even what was tumultuous at the time ended up kind of being in a closed door, but yet to open another door that would lead me to get to do what we get to do now. And I didn't even know. I met Stu when he would write some stories and columns for CNN.com, and that's how there was an initial relationship. And then through my first boss at CNN, her name is Karen Dessauer, who was great. But I didn't even really know that this existed, particularly in its fullness. I didn't know that this existed back then, but here we are, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful to get to do this with you, Jacob.
Thank you. I'm grateful too.
Let's do just a couple. Try to do these speed round about our ratings. I'll let you do. I'm gonna pitch this one to you about Iowa. What are some of the key differences between Iowa's first and third districts? Because we have them rated differently. So what do you think? One's toss up. One is lean, I believe. I should know our ratings.
Lean Republican.
Lean Republican. So just talk briefly about kind of the deciding factors between why those are in different places. Because on paper, they're not astronomically different.
Yeah. And if anything, on paper, the third district looks a little bit better for Democrats. It's got Des Moines and the suburbs there. The answer at this point is a candidate quality question. In the first district, we know exactly what we're getting, which is a rematch, a three-match between Marionette Miller Meeks, the incumbent Republican, and Christina Bohannon, the former Democratic state legislator. This race was decided by a few hundred votes in 2024, even though Trump won at the top of the ticket by 8 points. Miller Meeks, she has problems with her base. She is not the best campaigner. I believe she lost 3 races for this seat before she finally was able to flip it in 2020. And again, only by 6 votes, even as Trump was winning the district at the top of the ticket by a larger margin. Christina Bohannon is one of Democrats' best fundraisers. She has a lot of strengths on her end. And again, she very nearly won, outperformed the top of the ticket by a considerable amount in that 2024 race. So that's why we see this race as a toss-up. In the 3rd district, there's more uncertainty on the Democratic side. There's a primary there between Sarah Trone Garriott and Jennifer Conforst, who are both state legislators. They both represent similar parts of the district, but neither one has had to run a race as large as this one and on as large a platform as running for a whole congressional district, including one that doesn't just have the more suburban areas outside of Des Moines that both of them come from, but a whole swath of the rural southwest corner of the state. So we'll see which one emerges from the primary and how they look as candidates, but there's just a little bit more uncertainty there. And Zach Nunn, unlike Miller Meeks, Nunn has, I think, done a better job of running in this district over the last couple of cycles. And even though he clearly doesn't want to run here, he's tried to run for governor, tried to run for Senate, tried to run in the 4th district, and each time was told by the Trump administration that they wanted him to remain in this seat. He brings some strengths to the table. He's not an offensive candidate. He has a military background. He looks good on camera, and so that's why we have that race rated as we do.
And the other question related to our ratings was about Nebraska's 2nd district. Why did we move it to tilt Democratic and not even further to lean Democratic? I think that big picture, when you look at a district that, well, first you look at how Republicans had to spend at least a few $1 million defending a recent, the Tennessee 7th district in the recent special election where Trump finished ahead by 22 points. How are they going to win an open seat where Vice President Harris finished ahead of Trump? And so that's why we needed to move it out of toss-up. And I think the broader point was moving it out of toss-up and in the direction toward Democrats. There are still competitive primaries on both sides. Jacob wrote between 7 and 8 million words about that race a few weeks ago in the newsletter, which is a great story. I mean, it breaks down, all of the candidates, their bios, because many of them could be a future lawmaker. But I wouldn't be surprised if this is in a lean Democratic column within next year. But again, the bigger point was getting it out of toss-up in my mind.
Yeah. We typically remove races one category at a time. That's just kind of how things work. And while this is a Democratic district at the top of the ticket, again, it's not Democratic by a ton. Harris would have won it by about 4 points, and they have shown that a willingness to vote for a Republican at the congressional level with Don Bacon over the last couple of cycles. So, Republicans have a primary, Democrats have a primary, but Nathan, I agree with everything you said there.
Mail time!
All right, here we go. One final question for the show. This one comes from Georgetown professor Chris Warshaw. Chris asks, what do our House ratings assume about the national environment?
That's a great question. Right now, I think our House ratings demonstrate a closer race for the House than maybe what it is, or maybe overestimates Republican chances of holding the House majority. Now, what am I trying to say? I think that our ratings sometimes can be a lagging indicator of what's happening, because right now at this point in the cycle, there is not a ton of district specific polling, right? We know that nationally things are going extremely well for Democrats. It's pointing toward that traditional midterm election with an unpopular president. Republicans are on the defensive, but I like to see to make sure that that national environment, where is it matching up in individual districts? And except for a spattering of polling here and there, we don't have a lot of that. So if things continue on the road toward a traditional midterm election where I think things are most likely headed, I think you're going to start to see more shifts towards Democrats as we get more information and data in individual races. So, but that Nebraska 2nd District is a good example of where we are kind of baking in some of that national environment, even though we don't know all of the specifics about a race. Because if this was a good Republican year, or the president was in great position, or even a neutral year, we probably leave Nebraska 2nd in toss-up. But that's just not what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, I think our most recent batch of ratings changes reflected that. I think that right now, at least, the assumptions about the environment are more visible probably on the edges of the battlefield than they are at the center. We moved a bunch of races off the battlefield for Democrats. We put a couple races on the battlefield currently held by Republicans, races like Tennessee's 5th district, Florida's 7th district. These are seats that Trump won by a healthy margin, but the incumbents there make them a little bit more dicey holds for Republicans. But the fundamental question there is about the environment, looking at districts like Arizona's 2nd as well, Colorado's 5th. These are places that we're carrying on the map because of the environment. I think, what do the core of our battlefield, what does that assume about the national environment? Less, because Nathan, to your point, we don't have as much data. And so we are operating from a point of more limited information. And ultimately, all of these races, while they take place within the context of a national environment, are individual contests. They are candidate A versus candidate B, and that matters. And so, yeah, I agree that we're being cautious, but we're being cautious because we're not making any assumptions when it comes to those races. We are relying on the things that we know and we can point to in each individual contest to come to the rating.
And maybe the last thing that I'll say is that sometimes I often hear people say, well, there's a lot of time, right? 11 months is an eternity in politics and anything can happen. And technically that's true, but usually things don't change dramatically, meaning in 6 months, I really doubt we're going to be saying this is an amazing year for Republicans, right? It just, the presidents, their job rating does not change dramatically overnight, with the exception of George W. Bush and in the aftermath of September 11th. Usually it is much more gradual. And if President Trump's job rating continues to dip, and the calendar continues to move on, there's less time for both that trajectory to change and for it to improve to a point where he is less of a liability. And I know he's not on the ballot, but midterm elections are typically a performance review on the president. And if people don't like the direction of the country with Republicans in power, they're going to look to Democrats to kind of be a check and a balance. And if Democrats do well in this election, I think it'll be more because Republicans lose than Democrats win. The distinction I'm trying to make, I don't think it'll be because voters are in love with socialist policies and love the Democratic Party. I think it's going to be because they don't like what's happening now and Republicans are in charge.
Yeah. When was the last time voters voted because they liked a candidate or a party? 2008?
Maybe. I think that Obama's message, hope and change, was valuable. But after 8 years of President George W. Bush, particularly the final 3 to 4 years or 4 to 5 years of George W. Bush, people weren't happy. So could Obama have won just on hope and not the change without the 8 previous years? I don't know. That's probably goes into the answer to that other question for that other question. But Jacob, this was a good idea. The mailbag was a good idea. You get credit for this. Thank you. I think it was fun. But hope everyone continues to have a happy holiday, safe travels, Jacob, and to everyone listening. At Inside Elections, we provide nonpartisan analysis of congressional, presidential, and gubernatorial races. With a combination of reporting and data, we break down the key races and bring valuable context to complex elections. Please go to InsideElections.com to subscribe to our bi-weekly newsletter. We have individual subscriptions and group packages that are tailored for association and corporate PACs. If you like this episode, please tell all of your family around your holiday tables, around the Christmas tree. If you're watching on YouTube, click the thumbs up button, leave a comment, leave a rating. If you didn't like today's episode, please go ahead and email Jerry Ryan. We also want to thank our producers, Alan Tazinski and Ms. Melissa Lenner of Pretty Easy Podcasts, and our associate producer, Conrad Tolosa. Happy holidays. Please come back and join us again next time.